magazine of the screen. Living glimpses of history in the making. Presented as a public service by Standard Oil Company.
Republican running mates Eisenhower and Nixon carry their campaign to the nation. The president relaxes with Mrs. Eisenhower at Gettysburg between flying trips to pivotal voting areas. A visit from grandson David in Confederate cap is a welcome respite, and politics are forgotten as Sister Barbara joins the fun on the farm. But in a nearby tent, it's back to business as 500 Republican leaders meet. They hear the president, who carried 39 states 4 years ago, emphasize the party theme of peace, progress, and prosperity. Later, enjoying a round of golf, Ike finds that the best stroked putts don't always drop, even for presidents. But candidate Eisenhower can still come up smiling. Stevenson and Kefauver hit the campaign trail too, concentrating on 10 key states in the East, Midwest, and Far West. A shift of less than 1 million votes in these states can turn the Democrats' 1952 defeat into a 1956 victory. In Iowa, Adlai Stevenson holds a friendly powwow with Sioux Indian chiefs. His running mate, Senator Kefauver, proves a stalwart brave, cementing Indian-Democratic relations as he puffs on the traditional pipe of peace. And so the presidential campaign gains momentum as 60 million voters make up their minds. The Murray River in southeast Australia is on the worst rampage in its history. But a miracle of levee building saves these hothouses well below the river's record crest. The city of Renmark, too, has been saved by hastily built sandbag dikes, becoming an island in a muddy sea. Sandbags are stockpiled in the city to be rushed to danger points at a moment's notice. Thousands of families must be evacuated. Many homes are almost completely submerged. A cat, caught up in the swirling tide, struggles desperately for survival. Perched precariously on a post, the frightened animal makes a leap for life and misses, only to be rescued seconds later by our cameraman as the flood sweeps on. Roaring up from the South Pacific, Typhoon Emma lashes Japan with torrential rains and 100-mile-an-hour winds. On Okinawa, planes on an airfield are torn by the big blow. The downpour turns streets into canals. Damage climbs into the tens of millions of dollars as the stricken cities try to carry on as usual. The frenzied sea smashes through a coastal wall that had withstood the pounding of waves for generations. Ships are helpless before the typhoon's fury. The sea has won this battle with man. After wind and flood comes fire, adding new heartbreak to the suffering spread by Typhoon Emma. This sturdy little plane, built by a Danish mechanic, first flew in 1906. 50 years later, it will fly again. Veteran aviator Sylvester Jensen adjusts his goggles and gets a firm grip on the controls before taxiing down the runway. Plane and pilot are soon airborne. The amazing aircraft seems much more substantial than the Wright brothers' plane, although built barely 3 years after history's first flight at Kitty Hawk. Recalling man's earliest mastery of the air, the durable Danish plane spans the years from aviation's infancy to its supersonic age. After 20 centuries, time is catching up with the Colosseum. Rome's famous landmark is developing a series of cracks, and the sides of the greatest amphitheater ever built by the Romans is gradually crumbling away. Archaeologists and engineers are desperately seeking a way to preserve the gigantic ruin, which towers 157 feet above the modern city. After surviving the decline of Rome, the Vandals, and the Huns, the proud Colosseum is yielding to the relentless ravages of time. Bombs become tools of science high in the Alps. French geologists ferry the missiles into a remote canyon where they will be exploded in tests to determine the thickness of the Earth's crust. Delicate instruments will record shock waves. The explosion, which sets off a tidal wave in the little lake, registers like an earthquake on the seismograph and on our cameraman. The operation is part of the coming geophysical year, an international study of the mysteries of the universe. Harnessing the Columbia River, the new Dallas Dam spells the doom of a great and ancient Indian fishing hole at the foot of Celilo Falls, Oregon. For the dam, which is 15 miles below, will back up the river's waters until they submerge the rich salmon fishing spot. No more will the Indians of the region risk their lives, as they have here for centuries, to net the Columbia's hoard of silver salmon. Patterned after the Gatling gun at Wright, the Vulcan spews out shells as it opens fire. The rotating 6-barreled cannon can outshoot 400 riflemen, and with greater accuracy, too. The Vulcan is designed to answer the Air Force's need for a fast-firing cannon capable of striking against today's supersonic jet aircraft. At night, a blazing symbol of its namesake, Vulcan, Roman god of fire. Washing for a family of 62 is, for Mrs. Burt White, a labor of love. For in addition to 5 children of her own, she and her husband have made a home for 55 unwanted youngsters. Shoes reveal the age range, from 4 months to 14 years. Once homeless and unloved, the tots are cared for with affection and understanding by the Whites, a kindly Bowmanville, Ontario farm couple. It's a voluntary undertaking built on faith, which calls for some mighty providing and caring, too. The Whites just can't turn a homeless child from their door or their hearts. And as news of their kindness keeps spreading, their family keeps growing. Although they receive little financial aid, the Whites say their reward is in seeing the children healthy and happy, and in remembering the words of Christ. Suffer the little children to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of heaven.
In the year 1857, the United States was in the midst of the horse and buggy era. But scientists studying oil samples in their test tubes already were looking ahead to the day when petroleum would usher in a new age in America. It would happen in Titusville, Pennsylvania, 2 years later. The story begins with the arrival of Colonel Edwin Drake to inspect a strange spring that bubbled both water and oil. Drake had been commissioned to find a satisfactory way of collecting the oil. The citizens of Titusville were to follow Drake's efforts with interest and skepticism. His earliest attempts included digging straight down in search of oil. Colonel Drake himself watched intently as the men reached 8, 10, then 15 feet. And there it was, oil, just as he had insisted it would be. But success was not to come that quickly or that easily. The excitement of the discovery turned to terror as underground springs broke through to flood the excavation. Drake's dream of digging for oil had narrowly missed ending in disaster. But even as a ladder was lowered into the pit, Drake was thinking, there must be a way, some other method. That other method, he decided later, was to erect a derrick and drill for the oil. There would be no danger of a cave-in, and once the drill found oil, it would rise to the surface. But the drill always hit a stratum of water first. It was like poking your finger into a bowl of water. Pull it out, and where was the hole? The determined Colonel Drake would not, however, give up. He brought in pipes, convinced that they could be driven deep enough to pass through and keep out the water table above the oil stratum. When the pipe hit bedrock, the drill went back to work. A week passed, 25 feet. Another week, 45 feet. A third, 65 feet. Deeper, deeper, until on August 27th, 1859, they hit oil at 69 feet. Drake's Folly had become one of the most important discoveries in American history. Colonel Drake's single well was the beginning of a new industry that came into being almost overnight, the oil industry. Titusville farmers began probing their own lands as word of Drake's success spread. Sometimes their tools were crude, but their determination was boundless, and wells sprang up all across the countryside. Drake's well produced about 20 barrels daily. In America today, production exceeds 5.5 million barrels a day. Almost a century of unparalleled progress for our country, made possible by a man who wouldn't give up, Colonel Edwin Drake.
In the foothills of the Rockies, where the rolling Colorado prairie gives way to jagged snow-capped mountains, is the Royal Gorge, a mighty chasm 3 million years in the making. Railroad tracks hug the shore of the Arkansas River, whose turbulent sand-laden waters ground out this narrow canyon, carved through solid rock at the rate of 4 feet every 10,000 years. The world's highest suspension bridge spans this gateway to the Rockies, and at the gorge's narrowest point, barely 30 feet wide, girders anchored to the granite walls support the only hanging railroad bridge ever built. For 77 years, it has carried trains safely over the Arkansas's boiling waters. The first engine chugged through the 4.5-mile gorge in 1879. Today's streamliners follow the same route, stopping to let passengers survey the toy-like suspension bridge. From above, the span is not toy-like at all. Its towers alone are 150 feet high, and its cables, if laid end to end, would reach from Denver to New York City and on out into the Atlantic Ocean halfway to London. Tourists, perched on the brink of a sheer 1,000-foot drop, watch a train pass far below. So deep is the gorge that the Eiffel Tower, if set on the canyon floor, would fall 70 feet short of reaching the bridge. The world's steepest railway makes the precipitous descent to the depths of the gorge. The screening on the car prevents rocks from falling in and passengers from falling out. It's like riding on air as the car, seeming almost to brush the gnarled walls, drops down and down and down. Traveling a 100% grade, 1 foot of descent for each foot of movement, the car completes the trip in 5.5 minutes. A new set of passengers goes aboard for the climb to the canyon top, 1,053 feet above. The giant cables are set so that the two cars pass midway in the gorge. Eons ago, when the Arkansas was a rumbling giant, this canyon was its massive riverbed. Rising on the Continental Divide, the Arkansas raced through the Royal Gorge and on to the east. Joining the mighty Mississippi 1,400 miles away, the Arkansas became the 5th longest river in America. The Royal Gorge had been known only to the Indians until 1806, when Captain Zebulon Pike, commissioned by the Army to explore territory acquired in the Louisiana Purchase, discovered what he called the Big Canyon. Through the years, untold millions have come to gaze with wonder at this deep wrinkle in the frowning brow of the Rockies.
The tragedy of Hamlet clings to this medieval Danish castle, staring moodily out to sea. A grim gray relic of an age long past, Kronborg Castle was chosen by Shakespeare himself as the setting for what may well be the greatest play ever written. Just as the castle with its chiseled grandeur was real, so too was the melancholy Hamlet. For Shakespeare's play is adapted from the old story of Hamlet, first set down in the 12th century by a Danish historian. And here, at what has come to be called Hamlet's Castle, the legend lives on. For Danish children, the fortress is a place of pilgrimage. Their imaginations can retreat through the ages until they seem almost to be in the world of the moody Hamlet, the fair Ophelia, the weak Queen Gertrude, and the evil King Claudius. The words of Shakespeare, though 350 years old, come alive as the young visitors pass the castle's great ordnance guns. Their barrels, which once boomed royal salutes, will roar again, sweeping us into the past. To a castle where Hamlet, plagued with indecision, walks lonely, musing, to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub, for in that sleep of death what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. The undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience doth make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with a pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pitch and moment with this regard their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. The ballroom, which now echoes with emptiness, was once the castle's theater. In England, Shakespeare's plays were performed before Queen Elizabeth. The women's parts were played by boys. Shakespeare often watched from the sidelines. His philosophy of acting is expressed in Hamlet's advice to his players. Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue. But if you mouth it, as many of your players do, I had as lief the town crier spoke my lines. Nor do not saw the air too much with your hand, but use all gently. Be not too tame neither, but let your own discretion be your tutor. Suit the action to the word to the action, with this special observance, that you o'erstep not the modesty of nature. For anything so overdone departs from the purpose of playing, whose end, both at the first and now, was and is to hold as 'twere the mirror up to nature. Shakespeare, whose works were to live forever, pondered man's mortality. Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest, of most excellent fancy. He hath borne me on his back 1,000 times. Where be your jibes now, your songs, your flashes of merriment? And this was Shakespeare's own farewell to Hamlet. Now cracks a noble heart. Good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.